everybody, this is Your Overwatch. We are doing another podcast discussion thing. Some people were requesting it. We did one right after the end of the beta, and now we're here to just recap what we think after a few weeks of playing the game. I am Frito, and I'm here with my friends and co-owners of the channel. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
Hi, my name's Eddie the Chump. I'm also one of the co-owners. Looking forward to doing the podcast.
And I'm Liam Wiggle, and I want to keep doing these podcasts, so we're going to try and do these as often as possible to do different subjects when there's patches or anything that you guys request. So if there's anything you want us to talk about, then the comment section is the place to leave it.
So we did this at the start of our channel, which was about a month ago, and since then we've gained 1,000 subs, and thank you very much. We're excited to be doing this channel. We love talking about things in the game, so let us know which topics you want us to cover. We like doing these shows, and we want to keep bringing them. Maybe we even could do them weekly if there was enough news in that week. But the main things that I can think about was that the video Eddie made dropping about Jeff Kaplan releasing a sort of like pre-patch announcement that of things they were intending to do, which could be metagame changing, as well as the announcement of ranked mode, which I want to play, but I also enjoy quick match because I don't know if I want to have to alienate some of our worst friends from playing with us. So like, listen, you have to play Mercy all the time or you can't play ranked with us because it's really hard. Overwatch is a hard game, but I do enjoy playing it. I don't know how you guys feel. So are we excited about competitive mode? What do you guys think?
Personally, yeah, I really want it. I really want the competitive mode. I assume it's going to be some kind of like league play Call of Duty thing, or it's going to be like CSGO with a ranking system where you move up and you try and get to be the best. And I like getting good at games, and I really like Overwatch, and it's definitely something that I want to do because at the minute I feel the opposite. I feel like we're playing with people that we wouldn't normally play with, and I find it frustrating. And I don't mind playing with people for a laugh sometimes, but Overwatch is a competitive game, and that's what I want to jump into.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I feel a lot of the time when I'm playing the game, say Frito and I played yesterday, as a bit of a joke, we were like, why don't we double Lucio and see if we get any teammates that can do anything? And quite often the dreaded immediate Hanzo pick cropped up, and I'm kind of looking forward to playing competitive because it'll be much closer. Although how close will be up for debate. It'll be much closer to the kind of more pro meta, the higher up the ranks you get. And I think it will really, there's going to be quite a clear difference between people who are trying to understand the game and the picks and counter picks and changes that you need to make during a round will be much more prevalent. I'm actually really excited about it. I think there's a bit of a misconception that Overwatch is a casual game. I don't think it is actually in a lot of ways. I think it's welcoming to the casual crowd that want to play it. You can play this game casually, but I think rank mode is going to be a step up, actually. I think it's really going to surprise a lot of people at how difficult it is, and I think it will be challenging, certainly.
I agree. I think when casual players approach the game and just pick Genji no matter what, or Hanzo no matter what, you understand that they're somehow enjoying doing that, even if they're getting countered extra hard, or worse yet, don't have anything to counter or to effectively be a useful part of the team. I wonder how that's going to translate into ranked, though. I'm a little nervous because our experience with playing with random teammates in CSGO, for instance, has not been great, I gotta say. And in Overwatch, I hope people are more cooperative, really, because it takes so much cooperation, and sometimes there's some obvious picks, but there might be more creative picks, right? So you may think you need a certain character, but maybe the team might synergize better going a different way and sort of weighting the team towards a risky strategy. And I hope ranked players are comfortable with changing. Sometimes in casuals, I get people who listen to the things I say, like, hey, man, that Genji's probably not going to work out against 3 tanks and no sniper. Why don't you do X, Y, or Z? And if sometimes they do change, and usually it's a big benefit, but I don't know what we're going to get.
I see a lot of people trying to compare the two games, and I don't think that they are comparable, but something that I think will directly translate is that on CSGO, when you get a random teammate, he generally wants to pick the AWP, the most expensive weapon in the game, and do nothing, because that's what he likes to do, and it'll ruin the game for the team. And I think in Overwatch, I'm going to be more pessimistic about it, and I think people will choose Genji when they shouldn't, and I don't think they will listen to you. And I think that in ranked play that could be a big problem. So I think it will be like CSGO, where you really need to play as a team to get the most out of the game. And it also directly translates in terms of strats as well, because everyone will think that you need to do the default, like on CSGO, where everyone thinks you go 2 to A, 2 to B, and 1 mid on cash. And I think that it will directly translate like that into Overwatch as well, where you'll try and come up with something cheeky like 5 tracers, and they'll just be like, no, this is not a good strategy, you are a noob, and then they'll leave. So I that's what I expect, and I want to be playing it in a full team when that mode comes out.
I mean, I definitely would recommend playing in a pre-made in any sort of competitive environment. I think that goes without saying, but we don't always live in ideal situations. Sometimes you have 1 random teammate, sometimes you have 2, totally depends. I don't know if the Overwatch crowd is different to the CS crowd. The CS crowd is notoriously quite toxic at times, and whether Overwatch will be the same is up for debate. And we'll see. We'll just see through practical experience. I am really looking forward to it, though. I think that there's a lot of people that think they understand the game on a deep level who actually don't. And I think that this is going to... I think ranked play is going to crush some dreams. I have to be perfectly honest.
What I see from a lot of people is they'll play the game like as the character that they want to play, as Frito said. They'll get killed by someone, and then rather than trying to realize why that's happened or try to counter it, they'll just complain that that person's OP, where really they're just OP against the character that you're using. And that's the whole point of Overwatch, right? Is to get a different team comp and change a strategy mid-game. And I think that's something people are missing from the game. So I don't know if ranked play will give them a reality check and make them understand the game, or if they'll just do more of the same and complain about things. I'm not sure.
If you guys even know, but I've been watching a lot of opinions about this and made a video about it a few days ago. A lot of people are upset that Widowmaker is such a key part of the pro meta, and at the same time don't like how much damage she can deal at a casual level, because as I've made videos about showing the masses, our most viewed video is how to dominate as Widowmaker. I probably spawned a few of these players out there making everybody upset, but Widow is one of the few characters that can actually take over the game, and I don't have a problem with that, especially as a CSGO player. The AWP always had a star role, right? So we might understand that a bit more as a competitive level, but in my opinion, there's only about 3 or 5 top tier pro AWPers that absolutely dominate everything. Like I can name Zoms or Reaver or Taimu, for instance, but that's the way I look at it. There is a high skill cap, and you get out of Widow what you put in. If you're amazing, yeah, you can take over the game, and the whole game kind of comes down to that Widow play. But some people, I think, especially in the TF2 community, which I don't think, correct me if I'm in the wrong comments, snipers weren't really big in the competitive TF2 crowd. It was more the demo man and soldier being key in the scouts.
Well,
Snipers not so much.
They were big if you let them. There's, if there was a spy equivalent in Overwatch, a spy really shut down the snipers in Team Fortress. So I hear a lot of the same talk. I watch pro streams before they're scrimming, whatever, and they're all talking about this. This is the Widow issue in particular is all over the pro scene in discussion, and a lot of it centers around her damage and her role, but also, they're saying she doesn't have an effective counter. They also talk about her ultimate being one of the truly overpowered ultimates in the game. I have to say on this topic, pros want what's best for them, so you have to take what they say to a certain extent with a pinch of salt, which isn't exactly intuitive to a lot of people. They say, oh, this guy's a pro player, he must have something worthy to say. Well, you have to look at that through the lens of, well, they're going to have something to say as long as it suits them. Do you know what I'm saying? So I agree with Frito. I think Widow is one of the characters that the way the meta currently is almost a must pick in a lot of scenarios. I think there are a few other characters like that, depending on what game mode you're playing, but whether that filters into ranked play, because we're looking at it in that context, I'm not 100% certain, because Widow is one of those characters that can be incredibly powerful, but actually, how many people are capable of making that kind of contribution? Not that many, actually. Not that many. And I made a joke about the dreaded instant Hanzo pick. The reason why I make that is because at the pro level, there simply isn't a reason to pick Hanzo over Widow. There just isn't. He's not as good. He is one of the only characters in the game that you could call underpowered. The pros look at it in terms of utility. How much utility does a character actually have? What can they do? What can they contribute? And Hanzo just doesn't have the same utility as Widow. So whether that will filter into the rank mode, I don't know. Whether there'll be Widows that are exceptional at the highest levels of the rank play, I'm sure there will be. I'm sure that will be a part of it. But as with anything, this is all subject to change. Blizzard are looking at all these things. I think they're quite wise to kind of not touch the game straight away and kind of see how it plays, because they will obviously have all the data behind the scenes. I don't know if you want to move on to this topic, but there's one character that they're touching straight away, and he's fairly prevalent in the pro meta as well. And he also happens to be my favorite character to play, so maybe we can talk about that later. But Blizzard are definitely looking at it, and I think over the course of this first year of Overwatch, you're going to, just like you see, or you did see in League of Legends, there's quite a few meta changes, and Riot were quite severe with some of the changes that they made, and sometimes pros were relevant, and then a meta change came out, and then they were not as effective and were replaced on rosters and things like that. I don't know if Overwatch will be quite like that. I don't know if the changes will be as severe, but I can see those things coming for sure.
I don't think Widow's OP. I think that she can be countered. There's loads of ways to do it. There's you can have a couple of Winstons or a Tracer to get behind them to get on their nerves. And I'm not sure so much on a pro level, but at least in the normal games, I do think that the ultimate could be tweaked a little bit. I think that it does just tell you where everyone is, doesn't it? It simply does that. And I think that does make it, if the other team have a Widowmaker, I think that does make your team have to have one, and that is the only character in the game that you kind of have to have. So, personally, I don't really care that much, but I could see why people get annoyed by that, because it is one that you have to have, and the only counter pick to it a lot of the time can be to have a Widowmaker yourself. So it doesn't give you all these different options, which you would usually have with other heroes in the game, different ways to counter them and stuff.
There's also
I can see it.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but at the pro level, there's also the variable of some tournaments are being run with one hero limit and some aren't. So that's another thing to consider. So the game plays drastically differently if you have unlimited hero combinations or just one. So it's going to be interesting, because it's kind of like VHS and Betamax. Like, which variant of the game is going to take off as the official pro meta? This is how the game is played. We're still up in the air with that kind of thing, and any conclusions as far as the public game goes, there isn't a hero limit in the public games, and there probably won't be in the rank mode. It's something that they might look at later, depending on how the pro scene develops. But all of that we're in a glorious part of the game. We're in the blossoming of Overwatch as a sport and as a competitive game to play. So we know the least about this game right now than we ever will in the years to come. This is the period of great discovery. So, I mean, it's exciting for me as a player and as a viewer of the sport. So I don't know what you guys think about that.
I'll say a few things to what you brought up quickly, because I probably could talk forever on some of these topics. But one thing that should be noted, Widow is not prevalent in Control. And from what what I gather is a lot of pro teams aren't big on Control. They think capture point's definitely worse, but payload is the default desired competitive mode, which also yields itself to Widowmaker because of just the way maps are structured for payload. There's a lot of areas, a lot of long lines of sight. There's all that stuff. So I don't think I've ever seen a pro Widow get picked on some of the small control maps, except Ilios, which is a different story because there's all sorts of complex buildings and stuff. But the real flat ones, it's too easy to get on her. And an interesting point to highlight, and the single pick versus the infinite pick, which is the standard way to play the game now. One, first of all, I think Blizzard is going to be very hesitant to condone single pick just right out the gate because it seems to be against what they wanted for the game, because if that was the case, why didn't they just make that to default anyway? They surely have tried that out through their years of testing. They spent forever on this game, mind you. But when you have multiple characters that can double up on something, it does create a bit of a nightmare for competitive, in that we've seen some crazy combos like 2 Tracers, 2 Winstons, 2 Lucios, and the game just seems really spammy and goofy. But at the same time, if you talk about Widow being really powerful, if you can have 2 Winstons, then all of a sudden that kind of changes, because she might be on a balcony way in the back and you have your frontline attack, and all of a sudden 2 Winstons can jump her, because 2 Winstons is actually better than 1. And that might sound funny to say, like, of course 2 things is better, but picking 2, they work in synergy with each other, because one can drop its bubble shield and then another one, and you also are doubling up how much damage. The way they swarm and attack, they work in synergy. They're very good. 2 of the same characters, 2 of those specific characters work good. So when you remove that from the metagame, then you start to have these other problems. So the issue that needs to be said is that if the pros right now are concerned about balancing in single pick, it's a completely different story to what I think Blizzard's ultimately going to end up with. And my theory is, I don't think the pros played long enough in infinite pick, and maybe that's brash of me to say, but I start to think, like, isn't there better counters than, because often what the pros do when a top comp comes out and the other team is better with it and is beating them, they'll just mirror it, because surely at least then we're even, right? And competitive players oftentimes want just things to feel even. But I think if we let pros play with that long enough, there's teams that are going to be able to hard counter those lineups and force things to change. Then the game will be about who can adjust more on the fly, and that's kind of what I want personally, because the single pick oftentimes makes the team engagements very static feeling, and though that's more reliable from an esports standpoint, I kind of enjoy the craziness of multiple pick. Do you know what I mean? And I want Overwatch to be its own thing. So
Yeah, I kind of admire the craziness too. I'm not one for everything should be standard and all that kind of stuff. I agree with you. I think teams coming up with creative ways to solve a problem on the fly, and maybe having like a pocket lineup that they don't show, and then, you know, like the number 1 team uses their standard setup on a payload, and suddenly the other team comes out with something that you wouldn't have thought of, and it completely counters them and in ways that you wouldn't have expected. I think that's hype. Those are hype moments. I do see, however, when pros talk about the basic utility of a character and being able to double up on them, like, I do see certain characters not always being picked, but, you know, certain characters being picked to solve a certain problem. Like, you quite often see double Lucio, double McCree to solve his, you know, because obviously the health or the speed boost don't stack, so one Lucio plays one does the other, and they kind of cover McCree's gaps in his game, you know, his movement, and keep him healed, you know, so he can constantly be offensive and stuff like that. I don't ever see McCree not being relevant. I don't ever see Lucio not being relevant. I don't ever see Winston not being relevant. I'm not saying they're going to be played all the time, like these rosters won't change mid-game, but these characters just have a lot of utility. They can do an incredible amount of things. They're quite dexterous. So we will see variation, but I think that it's going to be limited until they get every character in the roster to a point where their utility is even. And even if I don't even know if that's possible, I actually don't know if that's possible. I mean, I'm going to be excited to see what they do with patches. Obviously, as a McCree player, maybe we move on to this next. Jeff Kaplan talking about the very first thing that they're going to touch, the very first hero that they're going to touch is McCree, because everyone is kind of up in arms about his Fan the Hammer ability. Everyone gets annoyed by the stun grenade, gets annoyed by the combo that Blizzard themselves say they love and they want in the game, and they design McCree to be a squishy killer, to be the guy that stops your Genjis, stops your Tracers, all that kind of stuff, and can go toe-to-toe with other damage heroes. But they're not fond of the way he shreds tanks. And so they're looking at his right click. I'm going to make when this patch comes out, I'm going to make an in-depth video about it. But, they want him to be able to still, stun, fan the hammer, roll, fan the hammer. They still want that, but they don't want it to do as much damage, so he's not so much of a tank shredder. I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I've made my feelings perfectly clear about I like using McCree's left click. I actually think it's an underappreciated part of his game. And I think the best McCrees in the game are people who can hit successive left click headshots and then utilize the other part of his character design when they need to. So I don't know. He's obviously my favorite character and I want to see where they take him. But I want to see what you think of that potential nerf and how you feel about playing other McCrees, or how you feel about him being quite relevant, quite dominant at the moment.
I don't know how they can nerf the Fan the Hammer without making it useless. That's one thing I don't see. I think McCree it'd be hard to do because you'd be making him more of a sniper, but if he was more of a skill shot character, so you could stun them and then shoot them in the head, but if you miss that headshot, they're out the stun and you're in trouble, I think maybe that's another way to try and balance it, but then you would almost be turning into a sniper as well. So I'm saying buff the left click, but take the hitboxes down or whatever on it so it's harder to hit. But if you get someone in the head, you're going to do a lot of damage. And somehow try and, I don't know how they could do it, but balance Fan the Hammer so that you can stop a Tracer and that you can kill her, but so it's not easy. I don't know how you do it, but I think that's what they should try and do.
Frito and I have had this discussion before, and I'll let Frito go in a second, but I just want to preface what he might say. Frito had this idea that I thought was really good, in that the thing about Fan the Hammer is that it's a little bit too RNG at the moment. It's a bit too all over the place. The spread is a bit too wide. With that wider spread, you can hit tanks reliably with every bullet, but already smaller heroes, it's kind of unpredictable about whether you'll kill them or not. So Frito's idea was to make it output less damage, but make it more predictable and more aimable. Actually improve it in one way while taking something away from it. So you make it more controllable, but output less max damage. And I think that's actually a good fix, because that way you are aiming it, and you will be able to reliably kill the squishy characters because you have more control of where the bullets are going, but you will not be able to shred a tank. So it's unwise to get up close to, say, a Roadhog, that has 600 health and can kill you in one shot. So I actually think that's a perfect fix to it.
That is really good, and I think it would be better for his left click, if his right click is nerfed, to just make the left click a little bit more long distance, because I barely used him, but from what I've seen, no one uses McCree past about 20 feet.
I mean, I've obviously played him a lot, and I've got quite good at landing successive headshots even at range. The thing is that people quite often say, you'll hear this amongst the community, that McCree's mid-range damage is what makes it, never mind Fan the Hammer, it's his mid-range damage is already really good. And I'm like, does 35 per bullet. It beyond its 70 damage range, and that drop-off is quite severe, it has 35 damage per bullet. That's not crazy by any stretch of the imagination. If a Pharah is being healed, I'd have to do the maths about this, but you're not going to out DPS her if she's got a Mercy with her. You're just not. At any sort of range, it's not going to happen. So I think it's a problem of perception about the character. People see that, his left click's amazing and his right click's amazing and he's got a flashbang and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know many people that actually play him. I actually don't. I'm one of the only ones in our friendship group, and when I play a good McCree on the enemy team, it's rare, actually, to play someone that is good. doesn't just rely on Fan the Hammer, and is a good McCree, outputting damage all the time, outputting damage. And that actually, because he's a hit scan character, that actually takes skill in a game that's very fast. To double headshot Tracer at fairly close range without a stun is hard to do. But it's something that good McCree players will get better at doing, is hitting these successive headshots. And I don't fear for the character. I'll still play him. I think he's mechanically very fun. I love using him. I love left-clicking people and jumping and hitting them in the head. I find that a lot of fun. So it's not going to put me off. But whether he'll have as much utility with the changes they make is up for debate. I don't know. What do you think, Frida?
Well, a whole bunch to respond to there. I definitely agree completely about allowing skill shots to win, because as the Widow player of the group, that's something that I'm passionate about. And when everyone is getting the pitchforks ready to get Widow destroyed from the metagame, I sort of like, do you realize how rare it is for me to even have an amazing game? Like, I do it often enough, but the amount of mechanical skill and concentration and performance that's required to do that, I feel like I'm kind of I should be rewarded for that. And personally, I don't know what it is, but I'm not that great with McCree's left click, actually. Like, I understand his role and I can play him definitely in his Fan the Hammer meta of stunning stuff. Yeah, of course I could do that. That's easy. But I'm not that great with his left click, actually. And I don't know if I ever will be, especially not to the level that I am with Widowmaker. So I think he still will be okay, and I think he'll be more in line with the other more rotating door of characters, right? So I think he might fall back into a place where Genji is in the pro meta, where if you have some sort of amazing player that can really utilize every ounce of potential from McCree post-nerf, he'll still get used. But he won't be the standard 2 pick, I'm hoping. Because we'll be surprised, I think people don't realize that very small changes to balance in this game will completely change a whole lot of stuff. So I brought up in my video from the other day that if D.Va gets buffed, right, if her damage goes up, all of a sudden Widow's weaker, because you have a character now that can also chase Widow, and this will even work in single pick, by the way, because you could have a Winston and a D.Va, and D.Va's considered not that viable right now, actually. But if she can get up next to a Widow and melt her, that's going to change. And I agree that Widow's ultimate charges too fast, and also at least should warn the other team. They should not know. I think that's kind of messed up. But if we say buffed Hanzo's recon arrow to have a much shorter cooldown and nerfed Widow's ultimate, all of a sudden maybe Hanzo's relevant. You know what I mean? I think we need to have a approach that allows these shifts to happen and flourish on their own.
Here's an idea. Battlefield, in the later part of Battlefield 4, had what was called the community test environment, which is where they tested all the changes that were on the ideas board, right? But it wasn't released to the final game until they got enough data, right? So maybe there's a playlist that is dedicated to all these changes, and this is where they field test them, and it's a playlist within the game where people can go and, all right, okay, so this already has the McCree nerf, and maybe next month we were thinking about buffing his left click and making his right click more controllable but way less damage. Okay, so these are the rules that you're going into. There's a whole nother playlist that is all about the future of the meta. And in Battlefield it worked really well. It helped severely improve its netcode. It helped really address some very pressing weapon balance decisions, and I think it's a great thing to do, actually, is to have this kind of playground where you're like, okay, the normal rules don't really apply. This is the rules that we're thinking about. This is the ideas room. And I would play that. I would play every character in that, and I think that would be really good for community feedback and for pros to go and test out their ideas, you know, and it's community ideas and it's Blizzard ideas all working and they're being tested out, and it's done in a non-threatening way where you think your rank might be affected or whatever. No, this is a test environment. Come and play. I think that's a great idea. I would really welcome that. What do you guys think?
We definitely need to make a video about that, because that's an amazing idea. I agree completely. But to another thing that I thought about, that the ripple effect of these balances that you may not see coming, Widowmaker haters, nerfing McCree ever so slightly, just to the point where he might not be picked every time, also nerfs Widowmaker. Why? Because if McCree is picked a percentage less, then you have less frontline stuns that slow down tracers. And just by the mere fact that Tracer's more viable, now you have another character. See where I'm going with this? It's this massive butterfly effect that it's difficult to see coming, actually. But I think that's exactly what's going to happen in the pro meta, because other than Control Point, where it's so close and Tracer gets picked, on Payload, Tracer's not seen that much because of the double McCree standard. But as soon as that starts to go down, or... You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The meta, is not linear. This is how I express it. It's not linear. You know, you take one thing out and it doesn't affect everything else. No, this is a moving picture. So everything that's involved in the tapestry, you pull one thread and it unravels somewhere else on the tapestry. You know that, and you really have to look. Like I use the term homeopathic. You have to take a homeopathic approach to this. It's not one thing that will solve the problem. It's everything is interlinked in, you know, in a kind of hideous new age hippie kind of way. You know, everything is connected, man. Well, actually, in Overwatch it is. You know, it really is. And I think we should beware. We should always beware harsh criticism of one character, because if the story of Bastion being OP when the game was first released teaches us anything, it's that actually players that are not given enough time, that aren't interested necessarily in public match of like trying to figure out what to do about something. And this applies to pros too, you know, like they're not always interested in doing the work, you know, and Blizzard has to worry about the game, you know, the health of the game on the long term. So I think it's kind of good that they're hesitant to make all these big changes. I actually think that's a very good sign.
Oh, there's a point that I wanted to make as well. To clarify my idea about the right-click change, I think specifically that, yes, it should do less damage, but the spread should be tight enough to the point where you can headshot with it more or less reliably, maybe somewhere in between where his left-click little default circle is and the massive almost shotgun spread. So maybe like split the difference between that. And there you go. That will do what they think they want it to do, where it'll be good against the squishier DPS/flanker type characters, but with the damage being lower, unless you hit all headshots with that, you're not really going to do much against the tank, which I think is good.
Yeah, I think control, giving more control to the player. If you're going to take damage away, I think you have to give them more control. So if you're going to take damage away, then I have to be able to aim this thing and not just spam. Like, I don't like, even as a McCree player, I don't like the fact that everyone assumes when I play McCree that I'm talentless. I actually don't like that, right? And I suppose that, you know, I get what I deserve. I'm playing McCree and all that kind of stuff. But I've long made my feelings clear about how I like to play him. But I would prefer if even the right click has some skill in it. All right, I've waited your reflect out, Genji. Now I'm going to stun you, and I am going to aim this concentrated burst of damage to take you out. That is my job in this game, right? And I don't think you can have a go at people who are doing what the meta expects and needs from them. I do kind of understand, like, Roadhog players are like, oh, well, this guy's stunned me, there's this much damage, he's rolled away, there's this much damage, I'm dead. You know, I can see that being annoying, but I just don't want to see him ruined, that's all. I just don't want to see him ruined.
Okay, I think we've covered McCree, unless Liam has anything.
No. What I said, I think if anything, they somehow nerf the right click, which you two have come up with some very good suggestions, and left click may be more precision based. I think that I'm happy with that.
What needs to be said, right? Having a stun like McCree has, he'll always have some section in the meta, as long as his gun stays somewhat useful with his left click. But that stun is really good at having some stability to your death ball and your front line. So it'd always be good for that, at least. Yeah.
I think maybe the stun is actually probably more of the issue than the fan the hammer, right? Because if they could still move, then fan the hammer probably wouldn't be as useful, especially since it goes all over the place.
A lot of people, when you watch pro McCrees, they're just using fan the hammer all the time, especially against, say,
Tanks.
a Reinhardt shield. You're just outputting massive damage against it all the time, constantly. You're just outputting. It's like a target that big, you're not going to miss. That's the big problem with it, I think.
I mentioned quickly the D.Va buff, which is the other thing he suggested that he thought might come. And I actually look forward to that change even more. I think the McCree one is warranted, but I like playing D.Va because she can fly around and she's really fun and has a little bit of a tech ability in that her shield doesn't drop like Winston's or set up a shield like Reinhardt, but instead is pretty skillful, actually, and can be used to completely absorb a Pharah ult, for instance, or a Reaper ult. I'd like to see D.Va involved in the metagame a little bit more.
I think she's a useful character. We've had a conversation before where she's kind of... You had this idea that she's kind of a hybrid character in that when she's calling in the suit immediately may not always be the best idea because her is it a pistol she has when she's not in her suit?
Yes.
She can output quite a good amount of damage. She doesn't have much health, but to use her in a hybrid kind of way, which is like a tank one moment is like a battering ram, absorb damage, move your team up, all that kind of stuff. And then also when you're out of the suit is like a mini DPS character. Like that's an interesting dynamic to have, is like a true hybrid character. My one concern about buffing her damage is I would prefer if they buffed how accurate you could be with it, not just the base damage. Because if she's too melty at close range, she's going to be a bit of a problem. I don't know how that's going to work. I like the concept of making her more useful, but I don't know how they should do it. And to be fair, Jeff Kaplan said they don't know. They're quite upfront about it. We don't know how we're going to do that, but we're looking at a few things. So, community test environment.
I mean, she just becomes a spam up close range and she's so melty, she'll just be another McCree, right? And then everyone will be saying, well, just keep getting melted by the right click or whatever the equivalent will be. So that's the issue, isn't it?
I think there's a few more interesting things they could do beyond damage. I said in the video the other day that if she could fly and shoot at the same time, that would be amazing. If she moved faster while shooting, that could help a lot, because oftentimes the issue that she has why in the pro meta she doesn't get picked past Winston is because Winston can jump at you, which D.Va can kind of do in her own way. She can like navigate weird environment better, and Winston is more of a quick further jump. But Winston, when he gets on you, auto aims for one, but he can also keep up more easily because D.Va...
His movement speed is faster.
Yeah, because Winston's movement speed is faster, exactly. Because D.Va, when she shoots, she's barely can move, so she can't keep up with that Widowmaker once she gets there. She's like, oh boy, I'm here in front of the flank of the Widowmaker, and the Widowmaker hooks away. If she could keep up with her even, so in any of those other options to increase her ability to move. Because I actually like the way her weapon works, and I do understand the fear that especially if you just up the damage, then she will melt everything. She's already pretty good against other tanks because she can fight at a medium range where they don't do that much, especially firing into a Reinhardt shield because it's just the same problem as McCree, right? It's just this big, massive amount of spread. Essentially, her weapon is sort of like a ranged shotgun in the way it works because it sprays in a big pellet.
Do you think her ult is not powerful enough?
It used to be so much better in the beta, too. I think they had to nerf it. I don't... Or maybe they didn't. I don't even know. But one of the betas I played on the weekend, D.Va ults were everywhere, and they would just decimate things. So I think maybe the radius got put down, but either that happened or everyone wised up to how to prepare for it. Because as soon as you hear, everyone starts to run and vacate, and they understand you got to get behind something right away. So, yeah, it's not actually that viable because it's so slow. So I don't know if it needs to be buffed, but it definitely isn't on par with, say, Zarya's ult or even Reinhardt's ult, which has a more supportive aspect
Even
to it.
Junkrat's ult is kind of similar for what you're supposed to do with it. Get it in the middle of a bunch of people and trigger it, and team wipe or kill as many people as you can. But at least you can shoot that one. Right? There's defense against it. With hers, you just have to vacate. So it's like a Junkrat crossed with a High Noon. All the time, she's not vulnerable. In High Noon, McCree's vulnerable. Junkrat stands where he activates his. She jumps out of her suit and can run around and still output damage. So I think it's a hard thing to get right, I think, with her ult. Or maybe she's a character who doesn't, maybe we do make her more, have more utility in her base mode and her ult isn't as useful. It's a very niche thing to be able to pull off. I don't know. I don't know the answers to these questions. That's why I'm not making the game.
The easy answer always to this, I would say, is if we're worried about a character not having an ability up to par, you always can increase the charge speed, for instance.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if it charged faster. Now, granted, I don't want diva ults constantly. That would be kind of lame. Yeah, it's a happy medium between those two.
So we've covered those two characters. Do you think there's any other character that you really consider a problem? Not whether they're overpowered, but maybe someone who's underpowered. I may have already alluded to this. But do you think there's any other characters that they should look at to make them better?
I'd like to see Zenyatta maybe have a bit more move speed or maybe a smaller hitbox. That would probably silence some of the complaints that he's not that useful. When I use him, I feel like I can overpower a team potentially if they don't deal with me. I think he's a very scary customer. The other guy has got to be Hanzo. I think it's the obvious pick. And there's 100 things I can think of.
Yeah.
You could do his cooldowns so that he could be more of the utility sniper. You could make his bow less difficult to use, simply because the projectile's hard enough, but on top of that, there is a slow pullback till it's fully charged, and if you strafe, it veers off to the other direction.
So here's what I think you could do to Hanzo. And there's a part of me that really wants Hanzo to be really good, because I have the great... I think it's called the Akame skin. I've got the white wolf skin, and I'm like, this is one of the coolest skins in the game. Right, it is absolutely one of the coolest skins in the game, and it changes his ult from 2 dragons to 2 wolves. It's amazing. But he's just not good enough. And if you're going to try and make someone fill a role where they're kind of... I always thought, I thought this when I first played him, I was like, this guy is supposed to be a sniper, but he's kind of the mid-range sniper. He's kind of like what would be called in Battlefield an aggressive recon player, in that he's supposed to be in the fight, right? There's 2 big problems. One, his bow takes too long to draw back. If it's a projectile, then I need to be able to draw it back quicker, all right? And number 2 is when I've drawn it back to its full power, I think his movement speed left and right should be the same as when he's not got it pulled, actually. I think he should be able to move quicker and shoot. That would make him viable in that role, and I think you'd see a lot more people use him.
I don't think that he's OP in any way, but if he's going to be buffed in these aspects, I think that the kind of auto-aim that his bow has needs to go, because I've been shot in the foot and hit in the head by that same shot, right?
So that's to do with the width of the projectile and the size of the headshot hitboxes.
That needs to go if they're going to buff him.
Well, I mean, they could do that, but I think even if you do that for him, it's still a skill shot to a certain extent, and it's still a projectile skill shot to a certain extent. And he's going to be, if you make him that way and you design him to be playing in the action and not as a sniper role, he's got 200 health. He's squishy. He's really squishy.
I'd rather he was extremely powerful and he's going to one-shot you every time with the bow, as long as it hit you where he's aiming. The whole shooting in the foot and being hit in the head thing or around the corner, that just doesn't make any sense. That just ruins the game.
Why don't we cover the hitboxes as a topic then? Because I think the suggestions for Hanzo are really good. I agree. But the thing that I would disagree with you about, Liam, is that ultimately all the characters are being played with these hitboxes. And why I say that is that in order for...
all projectile characters, I just want to add that footnote that hitscan characters do have a larger hitbox than just the head, but it's much smaller. Much, much smaller than the projectile characters, by the way.
The reason for that is the developers obviously have wanted to make the player's experience feel as smooth as possible. And in order to do that, there's some smoothing over effects. Unskilled players are going to struggle shooting just about every projectile. It's not an easy thing to do. And when you add in the fact that there's vastly different internet speeds, especially in America, a lot of them really slow, you get things like this, where the hitboxes are really big, because otherwise no one's ever going to hit anything. At least not the average player. When I say no one, I mean the general guy who isn't as dedicated as me and doesn't have 100 hours in the game already or something. I don't have 100, I think it's 40 something. But it's going to be a very tough experience for them. And maybe it's just because I played Quake back in the day, which was a game with mostly projectiles as well, and ran on worse internet back in the day, if you can believe it. I sort of forgive this aspect of Overwatch because most of the game doesn't happen in those really weird instances where a connection happens when you're around a wall and all that. I think that's the minority of the engagements, whereas the vast majority of the game, for the majority of players, is benefited by forgiving hitboxes due to just the randomness of the game. And it makes more people feel like the game makes sense, even if you take some deaths that seem a little goofy.
I think we will only know if they do it, but I think that if they were to buff Hanzo, make him draw back quicker and whatever, I think you'll see a lot more spammy shots, bam, 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 with the bow, and I think more and more it will show how bad the hitboxes are for him, and I think it will just make him a bit of a spammy character, and you're just going to keep getting hit round corners and in the leg, in the head, and all these different things.
I can kind of see where you're coming from. But the truth is, even with the hitboxes, you can hit someone, you can't even see their head, and it counts as a headshot with Hanzo, and he's still not viable, dude. He's still not.
I'm just saying, that's what I'm saying. If he is buffed, I think that may become an issue. That's what I think.
I don't think me or Ed support the spammable Hanzo thing. We just added that is an aspect of his kit, and maybe it should stay. It takes a second or whatever it is, 3/4 maybe, to fully charge the bow. But it's on top of the fact that he has all these other weaknesses too, and he has no movement ability, mind you. His movement ability is running up walls, which isn't that great.
Yeah, he's like a McCree that can run up walls. Like that's how he moves.
But far less utility on him with a harder shot to hit.
Okay, so remember the changes we were talking about earlier with McCree? You were like, maybe make his left click better and reward his skill shot. Well, if you did that, Hanzo is utterly useless. Utterly. Because he is what Hanzo should be. If McCree gets buffed in one sense where the good players... He's a hit scan character, right? So say I get really good with his left click and I can hit successive headshots, okay? And I'm playing a Hanzo who it takes like half a second for him to even draw back a projectile that has travel time and isn't a hit scan. I'm going to wreck that player, right, in that scenario. I'm going to utterly destroy him at the ranges where we should be competing. So I agree with you that, bad players might just make it like spam and they're just spamming these arrows, but they do anyway. That doesn't really make much difference. I just think if you he is underpowered. He is underpowered in his current state. And I think you need to make some changes to him. Not to maybe necessarily make him easy to use, but to make him more viable. Like, okay, so say his bow still takes that long to draw back. Well, at least when he's drawing it back, he should be able to move at full speed, man. Like, that it feels harsh that he has to stand relatively still.
Yeah, that'd make a pretty big difference.
He is very susceptible to being hookshotted for that exact reason. Like, Widow can... This goes back to the argument of him versus Widow. Why would you ever pick him over Widow? Widow can quick peek you. Widow can be behind a wall and just peek out bang, peek out bang, peek out bang. She can spam already. But you're saying that Hanzo would be out of order. It's kind of strange. I mean, he is just
be
harder.
out of order with dodgy hitboxes. That's what I'm saying.
But she gets rewarded for dodgy hitboxes too. Agreed.
Nowhere
not
near
as much.
as bad.
Not as much, but she does.
Yeah, no, I agree that he needs a buff. I just think that in the buff, they would need to be careful with the hitboxes depending on what they do with him.
Community test environment.
Fair enough. Exactly. Hashtag
Yeah, I agree. It needs
community
a
test
buff.
environment. I think that's why my favorite solution to this is reducing the charge rate of Widowmaker's ult and also informing the other team, because I think it's cheese that they don't know, and decreasing the cooldown of Hanzo's recon arrow, so that that's the more viable way to get information. Because, I mean, theoretically speaking, I don't think it should be 0, but if Hanzo shot a recon arrow every time he shot an arrow, he'd be in the pro meta, because that's an amazing ability. So now, where do we get that where it's not insane, but it's still viable? Because right now, I think it's like an 18-second cooldown or something.
8 seconds.
I don't think that helps anybody.
8 seconds.
What?
8 seconds, I think you should have. Maybe even 5. That might be too bad. That might be too spammy. You got to consider
Community test environment.
Yeah, test environment. But you got to consider like how quick Roadhog's hook comes back. It's 6 seconds for an instant kill if you land it. All right, that's fast.
Right.
That's very quick. Like McCree's flashbang
And here's the difference.
is quick.
Widow's ultimate sees everything, so you can guarantee where things won't be. Whereas Hanzo's arrow is good, but it leaves a little bit unknown. So it takes more skill to use, because placing it will be tactical and important. So I'd like to see that a bigger aspect of the game, actually. And on a side note, I don't actually think the being seen through walls is as big of a deal as people make in general, because of the way engagements in Overwatch work. There isn't as many insta-kills as people are making out to seem. With Widow, for sure, definitely. It helps Widow the most, because she can aim up your head as you come around the corner. But generally speaking, you have some time to react, right? Or you should have the Reinhardt in front when you're peeking anyway. Yeah, So it's not as strong as, say, let's say, what's an ultimate that definitely always has value? I'm trying to think.
Deadeye, always. If they use it correctly, Deadeye always has value.
I mean, Lucio's always.
It forces them to react. Yeah, Lucio as well. It forces you to have an ability to do something, whereas Deadeye, they literally can't peek into it. It wastes time at the very least, or it kills things. Lucio's ult, you can all move forward. Compared to that, seeing through walls, you still have to hit the shots that are incoming to you, and that's the point I want to make. I do think Widow's ult is overpowered over all, though, but that's my 2 cents on that.
Maybe if it gives the Widow the ability to see through walls, but teammates only like a pulse every 5 or 8 seconds or something, just so it's not as good for your whole team. That might make quite a difference.
Quite a common solution that's posted is it shouldn't last after she's died. That's quite a common solution. So it's, as long as keep it the same, but if Widow dies, it's gone.
That's cool. I also think it charges really fast.
It does charge really fast.
And I know I already made the I'm sick, reward me argument before, but there's a lot of easy ways to charge your ultimate, I think, actually. There's a lot of easy shots you can take. So because of that, it shouldn't charge that fast. And something that we haven't talked about yet is the Mercy ult, which doesn't really affect our level of play because everybody's picking Genji and Hanzo and nobody picks Mercy. But in the pro meta, it charges faster than Widowmaker because you just heal something. Any last comments, maybe? Any topics that we missed? We kind of went the whole way around.
Mercy's revive can revive everyone within a radius, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the rate that you should get that. I think there's a lot of ults like that. I do feel like in the game, ults are a little bit too much snowball, right? Like you all just save them up and then you just roll through the enemy team. And we had this issue the other day where we were trying to save our ults up, but the enemy team just had like this rotating ult issue where May would always like freeze us all when we all used our ults, and then when we got our ults again we'd go in, and if she hadn't got hers back, I think they had like a bastion that would then just tank us all. And sometimes I feel like the ults play almost too much of a role in the games, but I don't know what it's like at the pro. I'll say this. Pro point.
I think it's worse in some of the game modes that we have, right?
I mean, control point is.
Yeah, exactly. Control point is one of the worst competitively for that reason alone, because the attacking team theoretically should never lose. Because if you're patient enough to stack an ult combo and at least wipe half the team with it, you should win the point. Whereas in Payload, when there's multiple checkpoints and you always know you can concede ground, so the defense can fall less victim to that, right?
And they can fall back too. They can fall back, they can waste the ults, and then they can push forward when the ults are all gone. That's another option in that.
So I think it's less of a problem there. And in Control Point, the game's actually so short oftentimes, except when it goes to overtime, which is kind of a weird thing. Control Point is a very weird mode the way it's structured now, because it seems like overtime in sometimes can last half of the match, where it goes to 99 and then the other team goes mid 99 and then you're overtime fighting for the last point. It plays a little wonky for me, but I don't think it's as much of a problem because of how short it is. So maybe even in Capture Point, you reduce the time that you have so that you can't wait forever to charge your ults. That might be an option. I don't know.
Here's something that irritates me about Capture Point or Control or whatever it is, the one where, you know, you take it, the King of the Hill mode. When you're challenging it, they still get points. That shouldn't happen.
I agree. Though that would extend the timer, so maybe there's a way they'll have to reconcile that. Then the game might go on forever in the same way that I'm explaining
maybe they already
overtime
have.
issue.
It just always irks me if we've got like a 5-man push or a 6-man push and we're all on the point fighting for it and they're still getting points. That irritates me.
Yeah, but the funny thing is the mode naturally empowers the close quarters spamathon, right?
Yeah.
So like the Lucios and everything in a big ball fighting each other at once. And because you can't really make an individual play to stop the objective, as soon as that team fight is lost, everyone needs to run away and regroup again, because there's no point to fight if you can't wipe them and win the point right then and there. So it doubles down on that, which is kind of weird. I think the way it's scored and the way it's timed probably could get tweaked in order to mitigate that a bit.
Well, maybe it should just be a timer and it's done like Hardpoint. So it's the amount of points you hold it for instead of...
Right. That's exactly what I mean. Yep. I think that's an improvement over the snowball swingy mode where it is now, where it feels almost incredibly easy to get 99%, and then it swings back the other way, and you struggle until whoever wins overtime. I think that's a little weird. Any last major concerns about the game, where we're feeling it's at right now?
No, I kind of, you know, I'm really happy with the game. I really enjoy myself. So it's hard to pick out major problems with something that you really love doing. So I think there are obvious concerns which will arise and, you know, the community will talk about. But overall, I have to say I'm very happy with it in its current state. So I would say that, though, I play
I have to agree, though. The complaints we have are very minor, and the way they deal with them in the coming months, I think, will be indicative of this game's lifespan, actually. So it might be tough to improve on near perfection, but if anybody can do it, Blizzard can. So I hopefully they keep innovating and moving things forward.
No, that's it. Twice as long as I thought we were recording for. We got a lot of information out there. So if people have any ideas what you want us to talk about next time, any discussions, let us know in the comments. And thanks for all the support so far on the channel.
See you guys next time. Bye.